Hey everybody, Seth Campbell here with the new Segue Says podcast. Well, in this episode, I'd like to introduce a new artist to this podcast who we haven't seen before, as well as pay tribute to one that we have. And that one that we have seen before is Tom Petty, who, of course, passed away in the not too distant past of the recording of this podcast. I'm not totally sure when it's going to go up, but we lost him fairly recently, and as someone who grew up on his records, that was a pretty tough blow in terms of all the great musicians we've lost. But we're gonna play one of his songs, and that song, of course, is "Free Fallin'," mixed with a song by Steve Winwood called "Back in the High Life." And I feel like someone out there must have thought of this already, because it's just kind of sitting there for the taking. But I haven't seen it mentioned anywhere, so I'm gonna do it. Now we're actually gonna start with the Steve Winwood song because of my principle that I've mentioned before, which is take the song that's slightly lesser known, and admittedly this one was a hit, but it's not quite as ubiquitous as Free Fallin'. Because when you start playing this, people will think it's Free Fallin', and then you can kind of, mess with them a little bit before actually going into Free Fallin'. This is a concept we've seen before. But anyway, let's go over the songs a little bit. "Back in the High Life" again is title track of Back in the High Life, and it's a pretty simple straightforward song about really about learning to enjoy life and live in the moment again. Something I could take a lesson or two in. It's in the key of D major, and this piano sound, trust me, is perfect for it. Now, I've always been told that my singing voice sounds a bit like Steve Winwood, so it's only natural that I would eventually learn to cover some of his songs, though he's got one heck of a vocal range. Yeah, my parents were big fans, so we always listened to this record growing up. So this is a verse and chorus of "Back in the High Life" again. It used to seem to me that life went on too fast, and I had to take it slowly, just to make the good parts last. When you're born to run, it's so hard to just slow down. So don't be surprised to see me back in the brighter part of town. I'll be back in the high life again. All the doors I closed once will open up again. I'll be back in the high life again. All the eyes that watched me once will stop and take me in. I'll drink and dance with just one hand free, let the world back into me, and I'll be a sight to see, back in the high life again. And you can probably already see where this is going, because you've got this D, so it's the one chord, then one sus4, and then 1, and then 5. Although in this case it's a 5, it's a 5 sus4. And that's the verse progression of "Back in the High Life again." Now, "Free Fallin'," of course, everybody knows. It's actually an F. But I'm bringing it down to D for the convenience of this segue, for the ease of my vocal range, and in fact because when I first played this song in a summer band class many years ago, this was the key we played it in for our singers. And of course, it was probably the biggest track, definitely the biggest track off the Full Moon Fever album. And it goes like this. She's a good girl, loves her mama, loves Jesus and America too. She's a good girl, crazy about Elvis, loves horses kind of have to do a Tom Petty voice singing this one. It's a long day living in Reseda. There's a freeway running through the yard, and I'm a bad boy, 'cause I don't even miss her. I'm a bad boy for breaking her heart. Now I'm free falling. Now I'm free falling. I mean, at this point, it should be self-explanatory, right? I mean, it's that progression for the entire song. So you got, D, G, so it's the 4, and then 4, 1, 5. So the only real difference is that instead of a 1 sus4, it just goes to the 4 chord, but that shares 2 out of 3 notes, so it sounds pretty similar. And there's this little 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. You hit the instead of going back to the 1 chord on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Instead of going back to the 1 chord on the downbeat, you hit the 4 chord for 1 more beat. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Another half beat, actually. But beyond that, I mean, it's basically right there. Now, the only tricky thing, I guess, is that when there aren't lyrics, for the most part, Back in the High Life, it just holds on the sus4 a couple times. But it will eventually get to this bit, just before the words come in. And that's what we use to our advantage. Now, as I said, I like to start with Back in the High Life, then go to Free Fallin', because when you start playing this, everybody listening thinks you're playing Free Fallin', unless they happen to be big Steve Winwood fans. So you play through Back in the High Life, which again is a fairly simple song, except for this little instrumental bridge bit. This is like a so you get to the end of the post-chorus. Back in the high life again. Then you got the turnaround, and you just go back into the verse progression of Back in the High Life. At some point, you can make the switch, and you can either start that with the instruments and start playing the Free Fallin' variation of the progression, or you could do it with the vocals first. She's a good girl, loves her mama, loves Jesus and America too. And at some point you just switch the other one. So either you bring in the vocals after you've already switched, or you switch the progression after you're already singing. And it's pretty simple. And of course, this is, one of those segues that works pretty smoothly both ways. So you could start with either song, or you could go back into the other song, which is what I like to do with this one in particular, because after the last chorus, free, I'm free falling, free falling. You got this sort of tag ending, free falling, I'm a free falling, I'm a free falling, I'm a free falling. All you have to do is launch right into the chorus of Back in the High Life. 'Cause I'll be back in the high life again. No, the doors are closed once, I'll open up again. And there you have it. Real simple. Couple of great songs by a couple of really great songwriters. And like I said, I'd like to dedicate this one to the memory of Tom Petty, because I grew up on his music, particularly the Wildflowers album. You know, my parents had a few albums by both these artists, but you know, Tom Petty was one of the first singer-songwriters that I started listening to. So I really wanted to do one of his songs, and you know, this is a segue I came up with recently, so it seemed like the perfect opportunity. So hopefully you've enjoyed, hopefully you've learned something, and I will see you in the next episode.